There is a moment from last Tuesday, a single frozen frame in time, that my mind refuses to let go of. It plays on a loop, a silent, screaming film reel. A woman, a social worker with eyes like chips of ice, is telling me that she is taking my daughter away from me forever. And then, the quiet man from across the street, the one I thought was just my friendly, unassuming neighbor, just stops. He was sitting right there on my couch, a silent witness I had begged to stay. 1 second he was a comforting presence, the next he was a statue. His face a mask of stunning, terrifying recognition. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stared. And what he did in the second after that single frozen moment revealed that none of this was a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an execution. And my family was the one on the chopping block. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. Section 1. The world we built. Before the foundations of my world were ripped out from under me, my life was perfect. I know how hollow and privileged that can sound, but my perfection wasn't a big house or a fancy job. It was the sound of my daughter's laughter echoing through our small home. Her name is Maya. She is my sun, my moon, my entire universe. From the moment the nurse placed all 9 pounds of her glorious, squirming self into my arms, she was everything. Adopting Maya was the final triumphant step at the end of a long, lonely, and soul-crushing road. It was the beginning of my real life. Anyone who has ever navigated the labyrinth of adoption knows it's a marathon of the spirit. It's not just paperwork. It's mountains of it, each page a demand for another piece of your soul. It's background checks that feel like they're searching for sins you haven't even committed yet. It's home studies and invasive interviews designed to pick apart every choice, every corner of your life, and judge you for it. For us, it felt like there was an extra high-powered microscope fixed on our every move. I am a white woman, and my daughter, my beautiful, brilliant Maya, is black. Our journey is called a transracial adoption, and I learned very quickly that it comes with its own unique set of hurdles. And, as I would discover in the most brutal way imaginable, its own vicious biases. I poured every ounce of my being into creating a home that wasn't just safe and loving, but a fortress of identity and pride for Maya. Our bookshelves overflowed with stories about black heroines, scientists, and queens. Her dolls weren't uniform. They were a beautiful mosaic of all the people in the world, in every shade and shape. We found a wonderful black-owned barbershop an hour's drive away, just so she could have someone trim her hair who understood its magic and texture. I knew I couldn't be everything for her, that my lived experience was different. So my life's mission became building a village around her, a network of people and places that could fill in my gaps. We became regulars at community groups and diverse playdates. We talked about race and culture at our dinner table with the same ease that we talked about the weather, because in our home, it was the most normal, most beautiful thing in the world. For 3 years, our life was better than any dream I'd ever dared to have. We built our little kingdom of 2. It was a world of morning snuggles that lasted until one of us got hungry, of pancake Saturdays where flour dusted every surface, of wild dance parties to Stevie Wonder in the living room, and of bedtime stories where we'd both fall asleep. I truly believed I had built an impenetrable fortress of love around my daughter. I believed nothing could ever get through those walls. I was so profoundly naive. I put my faith in the very system that had granted me the miracle of my daughter, trusting it would be the one to protect us. I had no idea that same system could be twisted into a weapon, aimed directly at our hearts. Section 2. The knock on the door. It all began on a Tuesday afternoon. One of those achingly perfect early fall days, where the air is crisp and the sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue. Maya was in the backyard, her joyous shrieks filling the air as she chased butterflies, her little legs pumping. I was watching her from the kitchen window, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it physically hurt. That's when I heard the knock. This wasn't the friendly rap of a neighbor or the thud of a package delivery. It was sharp, official, and utterly devoid of warmth. 3 hard raps that seemed to vibrate through the floor and up my spine. I opened the door to a woman who looked as though all the joy in the world had been meticulously starched and ironed out of her. She was tall and unervingly thin. Her hair pulled back into a bun so severe it stretched the skin around her eyes. Her blouse was white, her skirt was black, and her expression was a flat, unreadable line. Her name badge, pinned precisely over her heart, read, Eleanor Albright, County Child Welfare Services. Sarah Peterson, she stated, her voice as crisp and colorless as her attire. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Her eyes weren't looking at me. They were already past me, X-raying my home, searching for cracks. Yes, that's me, I managed, my voice suddenly feeling tight in my throat. I tried to assemble my face into a polite, friendly smile. Can I help you? I'm Ms. Albright. I'm here to conduct a routine post-adoption wellness check. The polite smile on my face didn't just freeze. It shattered. Routine. We were done with all of that. The adoption had been finalized for over a year. The judge's gavel had been the final punctuation mark on that chapter of our lives. This was the absolute opposite of routine. A cold, heavy knot of dread began to tighten in the pit of my stomach, a primal instinct screaming that this was wrong. I'm sorry, I think there must be a mistake, I said, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. Our case was finalized. We don't have an assigned caseworker anymore. The department reserves the right to conduct checks at its discretion for the welfare of the child, she replied, her voice utterly flat, as if reading from a script. She then delivered the line that showed me this was not a conversation. Are you going to let me in, or should I make a note of your lack of cooperation in my official report? The threat was so immediate, so shamelessly deployed, it felt like a slap. Lack of cooperation. It's the perfect bureaucratic cudgel, a phrase designed to terrify you into submission, to make you feel like a criminal for simply asking a question. A part of me wanted to scream, to slam the door in her severe, judgmental face. But I saw the chilling certainty in her eyes. She had all the power and she knew it. So I did what I thought I had to do. I stepped aside. I let the enemy into my home. And as she brushed past me, a faint antiseptic scent trailing in her wake, I was overwhelmed by the chilling certainty that I had just opened the gates to my fortress myself. Section 3. The system turns against us. That first visit was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Ms. Albright moved through my carefully curated home not like a person, but like a predator sniffing for weakness. She wasn't there to observe. She was there to hunt for things she could twist, things she could use to build her case. Every testament to my love for Maya was warped through the distorted lens of her suspicion. I keep a clean and organized house, a sanctuary of calm for my daughter and me. But in Ms. Albright's eyes it wasn't stable. It was sterile and lacking in genuine warmth. She actually wrote that down on her clipboard, her pen scratching loudly in the silence. She gestured with a long, pale finger towards Maya's bedroom, where the bookshelves were lined with vibrant stories. I see a great many books, she said, her tone dripping with a strange, veiled accusation. But are they culturally appropriate? The question hung in the air, thick and poisonous. I was stunned into silence for a moment, then I rushed to point out the dozens and dozens of books celebrating Black history, Black artists, Black joy. I showed her the biographies of trailblazers and the whimsical tales of Black fairies and adventurers. She just nodded slowly, a tiny knowing smirk playing on her lips, as if the fact that I was so prepared for that exact question somehow proved her unspoken point. Maya, who is usually a bubbly, irrepressible chatterbox, sensed the suffocating tension instantly. She came in from the garden, took one look at Ms. Albright, and hid behind my legs, her small hands clutching the fabric of my jeans. She refused to say a single word to this terrifying stranger. It was a completely normal reaction for a 3-year-old, a child's unerring instinct about a person's energy. But in Ms. Albright's notes, it became a damning piece of evidence. The child appears unusually withdrawn and fearful in the presence of her caregiver. She was building her fiction right in front of me. Maya wasn't scared of me. She was terrified of her. The visit finally ended, But it was only the beginning of the nightmare. The quiet of my home now felt menacing, violated. 2 days later the phone rang. It was Ms. Albright, her voice laced with a cold, formal satisfaction. "I'm calling to inform you," she said, "that based on my visit and an anonymous tip we've received, I am opening a formal investigation." An anonymous tip. I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. The caller expressed deep concern that the child's fundamental cultural needs are being systematically ignored, leading to emotional neglect. An anonymous tip. It was such an obvious, shameless lie. She was using the exact same loaded phrases she had practiced on me during her visit. She was her own anonymous source, conjuring a case out of thin air and prejudice. The next 2 weeks were a descent into a special kind of hell. I spent hours on the phone with lawyers, their voices a grim chorus of the same terrifying song. Once Child Protective Services opens a case, the burden of proof is on you. You are guilty until you can somehow prove yourself innocent, and the system gives them all the power and all the time in the world to destroy you. It was during this spiraling nightmare that my new neighbor, Michael, began to come into focus. He had moved in across the street a few months earlier. He was a quiet, solitary guy, someone I'd only ever seen from a distance. He worked from home, doing some kind of tech job he'd mentioned once. We'd exchanged the usual neighborly waves, made small talk about the weather over the mailbox. He seemed nice enough, just part of the quiet background of my life. The day everything finally imploded, Ms. Albright had scheduled what she called a final assessment. I knew what that meant. It wasn't an assessment. It was a verdict. My morning was a blur of frantic, tearful calls to legal aid, each one leaving me more hopeless than the last. Just as I hung up the phone, my spirit completely crushed. My doorbell rang. It was Michael, holding a small Amazon package. "Hey Sarah, so sorry to bother you," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "This got delivered to my place by mistake." He handed it to me. His eyes lingered on my face. "Listen, is everything okay? You seem really stressed lately." That one simple, kind question was the key that unlocked the dam. The tidal wave of tears I had been fighting for 2 weeks finally broke free, and the entire horrifying story just poured out of me in a torrent of gasps and sobs, right there on my front porch. I told him everything. The social worker, the lies, the anonymous tip, the bone-deep, paralyzing fear that they were going to take Maya from me. I was a complete, incoherent mess. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there and listened to the whole chaotic story. When I finally ran out of words, his face was grim. "My God, Sarah, I'm so sorry you're going through this," he said, his voice low. He glanced at his watch. "You said she's coming today." I nodded, unable to speak, just wiping at my tear-streaked face. "Any minute now." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. "I can just be a witness. Sometimes having another person in the room can make them behave. I can sit on the couch and pretend I'm waiting for a delivery or something. You shouldn't have to face this alone." The offer was a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. I almost buckled with the force of my relief. "Would you?" I whispered, my voice choked. "Oh my God, Michael, thank you. Thank you so much." He came inside and settled onto the couch, pulling out his phone to look casual, just another body in the room. 10 minutes later, the doorbell chimed again, a sound that sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. It was Ms. Albright. But this time she wasn't alone. She had a nervous-looking younger caseworker trailing behind her like a shadow, and beyond them, standing on my walkway like sentinels of doom, were 2 uniformed police officers. This wasn't an assessment. It was an ambush. She marched into my living room, her eyes immediately zeroing in on Michael. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. "This is my friend Michael," I said, my voice trembling so hard I could barely form the words. "He needs to leave. Now." "Actually," Michael said, his voice shockingly calm, his eyes still fixed on his phone, "I was invited to be here. I'll just be right over here, out of your way." His quiet defiance seemed to enrage her further. She whipped her head back to me, her face a mask of cold fury, and launched into a loud, prepared speech, clearly for the benefit of the officers standing by my door. She listed all her twisted observations, her meticulously crafted lies. The sterile, unfeeling home, the systematic erasure of the child's cultural identity, Maya's fearful and withdrawn behavior. It was a breathtaking performance of character assassination, a public execution of my motherhood. Based on the totality of my investigation, she announced, her voice ringing with a triumphant, cruel finality, I find this home to be fundamentally unsafe and emotionally damaging. The systematic erasure of her racial identity constitutes a severe form of emotional abuse. Therefore, by the authority granted to me by the state, I am ordering the immediate emergency removal of Maya Peterson from this home. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. The words didn't feel real. They were like punches, each one landing with a sickening thud, knocking the air from my lungs. No, I gasped, my whole body starting to shake uncontrollably. No, you can't. This is her home. I'm her mother. The sound of my distress broke through Maya's own fear. She let out a heart-shattering wail and ran to me, clinging to my leg, her whole small body trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. You have failed her, Ms. Albright said, her face a mask of grotesque satisfaction. She took a step towards us, her hand reaching out, poised to physically separate my daughter from me. It's time to go, Maya. And that's when it happened. That's the moment that is burned, seared, branded into my brain for all of eternity. Section 4: The Freeze. As Eleanor Albright's hand, with its perfectly manicured nails, reached for my daughter's arm, my quiet neighbor Michael stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't lunge. He simply rose to his feet in one fluid motion, and then he froze. For 2 full seconds, an eternity in that supercharged room. He was absolutely, perfectly still. His eyes were locked on Ms. Albright. His calm, neighborly expression was gone, vaporized. In its place was a look of such profound, unadulterated shock it seemed to suck all the energy from the room. But underneath the shock there was something else. Something hard and sharp and terrifying. Recognition. This wasn't a dramatic, movie-style reveal. It was quiet, real, and 1,000 times more chilling. It was the unmistakable look of a man who had just found the final horrifying piece of a giant, complex puzzle in the very last place he ever expected to look. He didn't just see a cruel social worker. He saw someone he knew. Or, more accurately, someone he knew of. Something she had said, some piece of her venomous script, or maybe just the sheer, brazen audacity of her performance, had tripped a hidden wire deep inside his own secret world. When he finally spoke, his voice was deathly quiet, yet it sliced through the tension in the room like a surgeon's scalpel. Eleanor Albright. Ms. Albright stopped cold, her hand hovering in the air. Her head whipped around to face him. The smug, victorious look on her face collapsed, replaced instantly by confusion, which then curdled into raw alarm. "How do you know my name?" she snapped, her voice suddenly losing its authoritative edge. Michael took one slow, deliberate step forward. In that single step, my friendly neighbor Michael vanished completely. In his place stood a man who radiated an authority so absolute, so total, it felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and flipped open a worn leather wallet, revealing a gleaming gold badge. "Special Agent Michael Evans," he said. His voice now heavy with the weight of the 3 letters that followed. FBI. Ms. Albright, you are a person of interest in an active federal public corruption investigation. The shift in the room was instantaneous and seismic. The 2 police officers on my porch snapped to attention, their eyes wide with disbelief. The junior caseworker, who had been pale before, now looked like she was about to faint. And Eleanor Albright. Her face went from a mask of fury to a ghastly, bloodless white. "You will not go near this child," Agent Evans continued, his voice now pure ice. "You will not speak to this family again. In fact, You will not be speaking to anyone from this moment forward without a lawyer present. It seems your name, and the name of a certain Judge Miller, have come up in our investigation one too many times." He turned his cold gaze to the two stunned local officers. "Gentlemen, this is now a federal matter. This woman is being detained for questioning in connection with racketeering and fraud. Please secure her." Ms. Albright just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The mask of righteous authority was gone. Underneath, there was nothing but a common, panicked criminal who had just walked directly into a trap she never saw coming. As the officers moved to escort her out, her terrified eyes met mine for a fleeting second. And in them, I saw the exact same terror that she had worked so hard to put into me for weeks. My fortress hadn't been breached after all. The monster had been lured inside, and the gates had just slammed shut behind her. Section 5. The Unraveling. The hour that followed was a surreal blur. Ms. Albright, sputtering about her rights and her lawyer, was escorted out of my home. The young, terrified caseworker was questioned quietly in the corner by one of the officers and then allowed to leave, looking like she'd just seen a ghost. And Agent Evans, Michael, stayed with me. He made a series of quiet, firm calls from my kitchen, speaking in a coded language of case numbers and acronyms that I couldn't begin to understand. All I knew was that with every call, the knot in my stomach began to slowly, painstakingly unwind. When he was finally done, he came and sat across from me at my little kitchen table, the same table where Maya and I had our pancake Saturdays. He looked at me with tired, deeply sympathetic eyes. "Sarah, I owe you a massive apology," he said, his voice gentle now. "And a very long explanation." And then he told me everything. He wasn't in tech. He was a special agent with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. For the last 18 months, his team had been investigating a sick, deeply entrenched, and organized criminal ring operating from within the state's child welfare system. We'd been getting whispers from whistleblowers inside the system and seeing statistical anomalies that just didn't make any sense, he explained, leaning forward. Children were being removed from homes at a shockingly high rate in certain counties. The data showed a clear pattern. They were targeting vulnerable situations, single-parent homes, low-income families, and a strikingly disproportionate number of transracial adoptive families. His words sent a chill down my spine. It was a playbook. They had a playbook, and I was their latest target. He laid out the whole twisted, evil scheme. A small, coordinated group of social workers, with Eleanor Albright as one of their most prolific operators, was working in concert with several private foster homes and a corrupt family court judge. The social workers would identify a target family. They'd invent or wildly exaggerate evidence to get the children removed from the home. They used any vulnerability they could find, and in cases like mine, they deliberately exploited the complexities and societal biases around race, because they knew it was an easy and effective way to create doubt and intimidate parents. The children, traumatized and torn from their families, were then placed in specific foster homes that were in on the scheme. Those homes would then pay the social workers illegal kickbacks for each child they delivered. The final, most disgusting piece of the puzzle was a compromised family court judge, a man named Judge Miller, who would fast-track the termination of parental rights, freeing the children up to be readopted, often for exorbitant fees, generating even more profit for the ring. "Why?" I whispered, the word barely audible. "Just for kickbacks." "That was a big part of it," Agent Evans said, his expression grim. "But it was also driven by federal funding. A law called the Adoption and Safe Families Act, or ASFA, gives financial incentives to states to increase their adoption numbers. Now, the law was passed with good intentions, to help kids find permanent homes faster. But these people, Albright and her crew, they twisted it into a for-profit production line. They weren't saving children. They were trafficking them through the system, essentially flipping them for profit. They built an entire criminal enterprise around those state incentives. He told me he had moved into my neighborhood months ago specifically to get a feel for the community, to watch, and to look for patterns on the ground. He had no idea that his primary target, Eleanor Albright herself, would walk right into the house across the street. "When you told me your story on the porch today," he said, shaking his head in disbelief, "it was like every alarm bell I have went off at once." The methods, the specific language she used, targeting a transracial adoption. It was their exact signature. I knew it was them. But I didn't have direct, first-hand proof of her in the act. What I saw in here today. Her performing her script, making the threat, trying to take Maya right in front of my eyes. That was the final nail in the coffin. It connected her directly to the entire conspiracy in a way no document or second-hand account ever could. My living room hadn't been an ambush for me. It was an ambush for her. I wasn't just the victim. I was the bait in a trap I never even knew existed. Section 6. A glimmer of justice. In the weeks that followed, the dam didn't just crack. It burst. Armed with the irrefutable evidence gathered in my living room, Agent Evans's team executed a series of coordinated, early-morning arrests. The local news was saturated with the story. In total, 12 people were taken into custody. For social workers including Eleanor Albright, the owners of 3 private foster care agencies, their financial officer, and Judge Miller himself, arrested in his own chambers, a picture of stunned disbelief on his face. The indictments for federal racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy were sealed. The case was moving toward trial. The fallout was a media firestorm, a massive local scandal that laid bare the rot at the heart of the system. For me, it felt like a strange, hollow victory. Being proven right, being vindicated in the most dramatic way possible, didn't erase the trauma. It didn't magically undo the sleepless nights I'd spent staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with the terror of a future without my daughter. It didn't erase the visceral memory of that woman's hand reaching for Maya. Healing is slow. It's a process, not a destination. For Maya, it has meant countless extra hugs, endless reassurances that she is safe, that she is home, and that no one is ever taking her away. For me, it has meant coming to terms with a terrifying new reality. The system isn't just broken in some abstract, underfunded, bureaucratic way. It can be actively hijacked by predators who know exactly how to manipulate its flaws and use its immense power as a weapon. What happened to us was a perfect storm of calculated greed and ingrained prejudice. Albright's corruption was fueled by a system already poisoned with racial bias. Statistics show that Black children are far more likely to be removed from their homes and spend longer in foster care than white children. Albright didn't invent that bias. She just knew how to exploit it for profit. She knew that questioning a white mother's fitness to raise a Black child was a quick and easy way to build a fraudulent case that would seem tragically believable to others within that same biased system. Our story had a miraculous, impossible ending. We just happened to have an FBI agent sitting on our couch at the exact right moment. But for every one of me, for every family that gets a miracle, how many are out there whose stories end in tragedy? How many parents have had their children stolen from them by nothing more than lies typed on a piece of paper, rubber-stamped by a corrupt system? That is the question that keeps me awake at night now. The investigation has led to a full audit of the state agency, and several other families whose children were stolen by this ring are now beginning the long, painful process of being reunited. Their fight is just beginning, and in the end, this story isn't really about a crooked social worker or a surprise FBI agent. It's about my daughter, Maya. It's about a mother's love and the terrifying lengths we will go to protect our children. Maya is happy and impossibly resilient. She still chases butterflies in the backyard and falls asleep every night holding my finger in her tiny hand. Her spirit is a brilliant, shining light that no corrupt system, no greedy criminal, could ever hope to extinguish. We got lucky. But a child's safety, a family's existence, should never come down to luck. The kind of evil that almost destroyed my family doesn't just thrive in the darkness. It grows there, in the deep shadows of a broken system where unchecked power and unspoken prejudice create the perfect, fertile ground for greed to take root. Our personal fight is over, but I now see that the larger one is just beginning. We can't all just hope that a hero will happen to be sitting on our couch at the right moment. We have to be the heroes. We have to be the ones who demand transparency, who demand accountability, and who work tirelessly to fix the systemic biases that allow these horrors to happen in the first place. We have to be the light that shines into those dark, forgotten shadows. For my Maya, and for all the other children and all the other families that the system has failed. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.